Was Moses given secret knowledge on Mount Sinai that mainstream religious authorities have deliberately hidden for millennia? Did ancient religious leaders conspire to remove an entire book from sacred canon because it revealed too much about humanity's true origins? What if the most accurate account of creation and pre-flood civilization has been systematically erased from Western religious tradition? The Book of Jubilees, sometimes called the Lesser Genesis or Apocalypse of Moses, stands as one of history's most controversial religious texts, challenging fundamental assumptions about biblical chronology and divine revelation. Unlike the familiar Genesis narrative taught in synagogues and churches worldwide, Jubilees presents a radically different timeline of creation, dividing history into precise 49-year cycles or jubilees, and revealing details about the antediluvian world that contradict Orthodox teachings. The text's very existence remained unknown to Western scholarship until the 19th century, when European explorers in Ethiopia discovered it preserved within the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church's biblical canon. This raises a profound question. Why did one of Christianity's oldest continuous traditions preserve a text that other branches of the faith deliberately excluded? The answer lies in the Ethiopian Church's unique isolation from Roman and Byzantine religious politics, allowing it to maintain sacred texts that were systematically purged elsewhere. Scholarly analysis suggests Jubilees was composed between 160 to 150 BCE during the Maccabean period, making it older than many texts included in today's biblical canon. Written in Hebrew and later translated into Greek, Latin, Syriac, and Guizi, ancient Ethiopian. The text was widely circulated among diverse religious communities in the ancient world. Archaeological evidence confirms its importance. Fragments discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran reveal Jubilees was among the most copied texts in the library, suggesting the Essene community considered it authoritative scripture. Yet despite this widespread early acceptance, Jubilees vanished from Western religious tradition following a series of church councils that established the official biblical canon. The Council of Laodicea 363 to 364 CE and subsequent ecclesiastical authorities deliberately excluded it, despite references to Jubilees appearing in the writings of early church fathers including Justin Martyr, Origen, and Epiphanius. This systematic suppression raises troubling questions about religious censorship and the control of sacred knowledge. The text's rediscovery created immediate controversy. When German missionary August Dillmann published the first modern translation in 1850, religious authorities were confronted with a fundamental challenge to established doctrine. Here was a text claiming divine origin, purportedly dictated by the angel of the presence to Moses on Mount Sinai, that contradicted official narratives about creation, sin, and the covenant between God and humanity. Jubilees presents itself not as mere commentary but as direct revelation, stating, "These are the words of the division of days according to the law and testimony, according to the division of years, from the day of creation until the day when the heavens and earth shall be renewed." This bold claim positions the text not as secondary scripture but as the definitive chronology of sacred history, a direct challenge to ecclesiastical authority. Modern scholarship has uncovered striking evidence that Jubilees may preserve traditions older than Genesis itself. Linguistic analysis reveals archaic Hebrew constructions and references to astronomical knowledge consistent with Second Temple period understanding. The text's detailed calendar system, a 364-day solar calendar divided into 4 seasons of exactly 13 weeks each, appears to predate the lunar calendar adopted by later Jewish authorities and continues to influence Ethiopian Orthodox timekeeping to this day. Perhaps most controversially, archaeological discoveries throughout the Middle East have uncovered cultural practices and beliefs that align more closely with Jubilees' account than with canonical Genesis. Mesopotamian flood narratives, Sumerian king lists, and Ugaritic texts about divine beings mating with humans all find closer parallels in Jubilees than in conventional biblical accounts, suggesting the text preserves ancient Near Eastern traditions deliberately sanitized from official scripture. The manuscript history itself reads like a religious thriller. For centuries, European scholars dismissed references to this mysterious Book of Divisions as mere legend until Scottish explorer James Bruce acquired 3 complete Ethiopic manuscripts in 1773. These sat largely untranslated in European libraries for decades, their significance unrecognized. When systematic translation finally began, the text revealed a comprehensive alternative history of humanity's first 2,450 years, from creation to Moses, that threatened to undermine centuries of established religious chronology. Today, the Book of Jubilees occupies a paradoxical position in religious studies, academically acknowledged as a crucial pseudepigraphical text but religiously marginalized except in Ethiopia, where it remains canonical scripture. This stark contrast raises profound questions about religious authority, scriptural authenticity, and the politics of canonization. If a text so widely venerated in early Jewish and Christian communities could be effectively erased from religious memory, what other sacred knowledge might have been deliberately suppressed? What if the angels themselves taught humans the forbidden arts of warfare, cosmetics, and sorcery? Could our conventional understanding of human sin be fundamentally flawed? Why would religious authorities suppress a text that provides precise details about the antediluvian world that conventional scripture only hints at? The Book of Jubilees contains narratives so controversial and challenging to established doctrine that its suppression appears less mysterious when examining its actual content. Unlike the relatively sparse account in Genesis, Jubilees presents an expansive, detailed chronicle of the pre-flood world that fundamentally reframes humanity's fall and introduces elements that later religious authorities deemed dangerous to Orthodox faith. Perhaps most provocatively, Jubilees provides an elaborate account of the Watchers, fallen angels who descended to earth to take human wives. While Genesis 6 briefly mentions sons of God, who married daughters of men, Jubilees expands this cryptic reference into a comprehensive narrative. And it came to pass when the children of men began to multiply on the face of the earth and daughters were born unto them, that the angels of God saw them on a certain year of this jubilee, that they were beautiful to look upon. And they took themselves wives of all whom they chose, and they bare unto them sons, and they were giants. The text proceeds to name these angels: Semjaza, Arakiba, Ramiel, Kokabeel, and others, and explicitly describes how they taught humans technologies and knowledge forbidden by divine decree. According to Jubilees, these fallen angels introduced humans to weaponry, cosmetics, sorcery, astrology, and divination, arts that corrupted humanity and ultimately led to the flood. This detailed account of supernatural beings sharing forbidden knowledge directly contradicts later theological positions that placed responsibility for sin solely on human shoulders. The text's astronomical information proved especially problematic for later religious authorities. Jubilees insists upon a solar calendar of exactly 364 days, 52 perfect weeks, rather than the lunar calendar later adopted by Rabbinic Judaism or the modified solar calendar of Rome. This calendrical dispute was not merely academic. It determined when religious festivals should be celebrated and became a flashpoint in power struggles between competing religious authorities. By the time Christianity became Rome's official religion, any text advocating an alternative calendar system represented a direct challenge to ecclesiastical control over sacred time. Perhaps most disturbingly for monotheistic orthodoxy, Jubilees presents a complex cosmology where divine authority is delegated through multiple layers of angelic beings. The text describes how God assigned specific angels to oversee different nations, and he sanctified them and gathered them from amongst all the children of men. For there are many nations and many peoples, and all are his, and over all hath he placed spirits in authority to lead them astray from him. This conception of divine governance through intermediary beings contradicted the increasingly strict monotheism promoted by both Rabbinic Judaism and Imperial Christianity. Jubilees also provides explicit details about demonic activities that mainstream scripture avoids. It describes how evil spirits specifically target human sexuality, bodily functions, and childbirth, areas later religious authorities preferred to address with greater restraint. The text states that demons lead astray and destroy and attack and do battle and cause destruction on the earth, and work evil on the earth. This frank acknowledgement of demonic influence over physical existence contradicted later theological trends that sought to minimize supernatural explanations for natural phenomena. The book's treatment of women and gender proved particularly problematic for patriarchal religious systems. While certainly not modern in its gender conceptions, Jubilees nonetheless gives significantly more attention to female figures than Genesis. It names the wives of patriarchs. Adam's wife is not merely Eve, but Awan, and describes their roles in sacred history with greater detail. Most surprisingly, it attributes the invention of clothing not to divine intervention after the fall, but to a woman named Awan. And Awan, his wife, made garments out of fig leaves for herself and covered her shame. Such attribution of cultural innovation to women contradicted later religious narratives that emphasized male spiritual authority. Beyond these theological challenges, Jubilees contains numerous laws and commandments not found in canonical scripture. It presents detailed regulations concerning everything from proper sexual conduct to agricultural practices, often with greater strictness than Torah law. Most notably, it absolutely forbids intermarriage with Gentiles, a position that became politically problematic once Christianity began actively seeking converts from all nations. The text states unequivocally, "And if there is any man who wishes in Israel to give his daughter or his sister to any man who is of the seed of the Gentiles, he shall surely die, and they shall stone him with stones." Such exclusivity directly contradicted Christianity's universalizing mission. When examining these forbidden narratives collectively, the systematic suppression of Jubilees becomes comprehensible not as random historical accident, but as deliberate theological damage control. The text simply contained too many elements that challenged emerging orthodoxies, undermined ecclesiastical authority, and preserved alternative spiritual traditions that new religious hierarchies sought to supplant. Its continued presence in the Ethiopian canon stands as testament to what might have been a different trajectory for Abrahamic faiths had alternative voices not been silenced. How could a text revered by early Christians and Jews alike vanish from religious consciousness for over a millennium? What does the deliberate exclusion of Jubilees reveal about the politics of scriptural authority? And most provocatively, what if the version of sacred history we've inherited represents not divine selection but calculated censorship? The systematic suppression of the Book of Jubilees stands as one of religious history's most revealing case studies in how canonical boundaries are established and enforced. Despite its profound influence on early Judeo-Christian thought, Jubilees underwent a dramatic transformation from authoritative scripture to forbidden text, a journey that illuminates the often hidden power dynamics behind religious orthodoxy. Evidence of Jubilees' early authority is overwhelming. Among the Dead Sea Scrolls, archaeologists discovered at least 15 manuscript fragments of Jubilees, a quantity exceeded only by Psalms, Deuteronomy, and Isaiah. This statistical prominence suggests the Qumran community, widely considered keepers of authentic Jewish tradition during a period of perceived corruption in Jerusalem, viewed Jubilees as essential scripture. Similarly, early Christian communities from Ethiopia to Rome cited Jubilees as authoritative. Tertullian, Justin Martyr, Origen, and Epiphanius all reference it in their writings, treating its contents with the same reverence as canonical texts. The pivotal question emerges: what transformed this widely accepted scripture into a marginalized, suppressed document? The answer lies not in theological evaluation but in ecclesiastical politics. As Christianity evolved from persecuted sect to imperial religion in the 4th century CE, church leaders faced increasing pressure to standardize doctrine across the diverse communities they sought to govern. Texts like Jubilees, with their alternative chronologies, elaborate angelologies, and strict legal requirements, represented potential sources of division that threatened ecclesiastical control. The Council of Laodicea, 363 to 364 CE, marked a decisive turning point, explicitly prohibiting the reading of non-canonical books in churches. Though the Council's surviving canons don't name specific excluded texts, historical records indicate Jubilees was among the primary targets. This council didn't merely express theological preference. It wielded political power, threatening excommunication for clergy who continued using unauthorized scriptures. Within decades, possession of texts like Jubilees could trigger accusations of heresy, with consequences ranging from social ostracism to execution. The suppression accelerated under Emperor Theodosius I, whose Theodosian Code criminalized deviation from officially sanctioned doctrine. As imperial Christianity solidified its power, systematic efforts to eliminate alternative scriptures intensified. Manuscripts were confiscated and destroyed. Copying of non-canonical texts became dangerous. This campaign proved so effective that by the 6th century, Jubilees had virtually disappeared from Western religious consciousness, surviving only in distant Ethiopia and in scattered references by early Christian writers that medieval theologians often misunderstood or dismissed. The Ethiopian exception proves particularly revealing. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, one of Christianity's oldest continuous traditions, preserved Jubilees in its biblical canon, considering it divinely inspired scripture to this day. This preservation occurred not because Ethiopian Christianity developed in isolation, it maintained contact with Alexandrian and other Eastern churches, but because it successfully resisted the imperial standardization that affected other Christian communities. When Roman ecclesiastical authorities pressed for conformity, Ethiopian religious leaders maintained their traditional canon, demonstrating that canonization reflected power dynamics as much as theological discernment. Archaeological discoveries in the modern era have further illuminated Jubilees' suppression. Besides the Dead Sea Scroll fragments, researchers have identified quotations and allusions to Jubilees in numerous early Christian texts, including the Epistle of Barnabas, the Apocalypse of Peter, and the Testament of Moses. These references reveal that Jubilees shaped early Christian thought far more profoundly than later tradition acknowledged, influencing concepts of time, angelic hierarchies, and the origin of evil that became embedded in Christian theology even as their source was forgotten or denied. Perhaps most significantly, modern scholarship has identified distinct parallels between Jubilees and the New Testament itself. The Epistle of Jude directly quotes the Book of Enoch, another text Jubilees draws upon extensively, and appears to reference Jubilees' unique account of Michael's dispute with Satan over Moses' body. The Gospel of Luke's infancy narrative contains structural and thematic elements strikingly similar to Jubilees' birth accounts. These parallels suggest canonical Christian scripture itself was influenced by the very texts later authorities would suppress, a profound irony in the history of canonization. The rediscovery of Jubilees in the modern era triggered immediate controversy. When European scholars first encountered complete manuscripts in the 18th and 19th centuries, religious authorities faced uncomfortable questions about canon formation. If a text this significant could be excluded, what did that reveal about the supposedly divine guidance behind canonical selection? The academic community's embrace of Jubilees as a vital source for understanding Second Temple Judaism contrasted sharply with religious institutions' continued marginalization of the text, a tension that persists today. This historical trajectory reveals canonization not as a purely spiritual process but as an exercise in religious authority. The exclusion of Jubilees demonstrates how powerful religious institutions shape sacred history by determining which voices from the past will be remembered and which will be silenced. The text suppression allowed later authorities to present their interpretations as the only legitimate understanding of creation, sin, and covenant, effectively rewriting religious history while claiming merely to preserve it. Today, the Book of Jubilees occupies an ambiguous position, academically recognized as crucial for understanding early Judaism and Christianity, religiously canonical for Ethiopian Orthodox believers, yet still considered apocryphal by most Western denominations. This divided status testifies to the enduring impact of ancient suppression campaigns. Even as scholars acknowledge Jubilees' historical significance, the text remains excluded from the religious consciousness of most Christians and Jews, its distinctive voice still effectively silenced for the majority of believers. The case of Jubilees ultimately forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about religious authority and the transmission of sacred knowledge. If a text this influential could be systematically erased from Western religious tradition, despite its early authority and profound theological depth, we must reconsider the processes that shaped our inherited understanding of sacred history. The Book of Jubilees stands as both revelation and warning. Revelation of an alternative sacred narrative preserved against tremendous odds, and warning about how religious power can be wielded to control which voices from the past we are permitted to hear.